Hello class, welcome back. Today is March 31st, and this is your lecture for today. Couple of announcements. You're not going to have a second assignment today. This is going to be it. Just this Ed puzzle. I'll fill it with some questions. But tomorrow you will. So we'll just go just Ed puzzle today. It'll just be a lecture. It'll be a little bit lengthy, but hey. It's all good. We're here. I'm going to try to make it a little bit interesting. Okay, so we're talking about the Unit 5, 1920s and 1930s. Need some chapstick. Hang on. Okay. So we just got out of World War I. Okay, World War I. WWI. They didn't call it World War I because they didn't know. They called it the Great War. And we get back, and things are kind of good and bad. So we're going to talk about the good, and we're going to talk about the bad. But I'm going to throw something out there. It may sound like it's a little left field, a little irrelevant, but you'll figure it out here. You need to know that during World War I, and we've hit on this before, that there was Russia, and they fought with us. But during World War I, they were taken over by a group called the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks, okay? And the Bolsheviks were communist. So, basically, what communism is like now you work and you get paid. And the federal government takes a little bit of that, and it's a tax. Then they use it on whatever, and then you have your money, you can use it on whatever you want. With communism, it's like everyone works, but everyone just gets paid the same amount by the government. That's a very simple definition, but ultimately, I would be a teacher, and I would teach, and then somebody would do this, somebody would do that, and we all make the same amount of money. The government provides everything to us. So there is no, in a communist country, there wouldn't be toothpaste. There would just be one type of toothpaste that the government sold to you, and you would kind of make the same as the people around you, and that's communism. And at the time, it's seen as bad now still, but at the time communism was like no bueno. Like people did not like communism, not one bit. So the Bolsheviks were communists and they take over Russia. Russia stops being Russia and it becomes the Soviet Union. Okay, but when I refer to the Soviet Union, geographically it's the same thing. It's just a different country. It's called something different. Soviet Union, Russia. Russia becomes the Soviet Union, and now they've gone back. Okay. So if somebody ever talks about Soviet Russia, they're referring to this time period between World War I and the 1980s-ish. So Americans are afraid of becoming communists, and communism is often depicted as red. The color red is what communism is. So they call it the Red Scare. It's easy to remember because communism is red, and we're scared of it. Scared of communism, the Red Scare. Okay? Now, I know that sounds a little random, but that's some of the bad things that's happening. Another bad thing is labor. Farmers are suffering a lot. So there's this huge demand for food for these soldiers, and then it's just like, right, no more demand. The soldiers don't need anything, you know, and it's spiting these farmers get into a bad situation. Same thing with labor. There was a demand for a lot of these bullets and guns and all this stuff, and now that just kind of went flat. There were a lot of strikes, a lot of issues. I'm not getting into it because we are going a little faster than normally anticipated. So just know that labor was one of the issues. And America's like this, but it's still better off than Europe. Europe is like Europe's not in a good spot. So America's still doing better than Europe. That means that there's a lot of immigrants that are trying to come over into America to get these jobs. Okay, so that's going to be some of the bad from World War I. We've also got some good. Okay, so we're going to talk about Henry Ford, and I'm going to explain this to you. Henry Ford did not invent the car. He invented the assembly line. Okay, so the car used a gasoline engine, and the gasoline engine was very efficient. We still use it today. And cars, if you remember, were only owned by very rich people, very wealthy people. And Henry Ford figured out something called the assembly line. So if I were to put up a bunch of pictures of like a line of Toyotas or something, you'll notice that all of them look relatively similar, if not the same. And that's because it's easier to produce the parts for these cars in larger quantities. So if we keep... My tooth looks gross. I'm sorry. So his idea is, let's just make one car, and let's just make a bunch of them. And he invents something called the assembly line. So basically there would be one person, and that person's in charge of bolting on the wheels. And then the car moves this way, and the next person is. So if we were making this, I have this trumpet. If somebody was making this in an assembly line, what would happen is maybe just the blue tube part would come to them. Then they would be in charge of putting the buttons on. And then they'd slide to the next person. Then they'd put the buttons on. And that's what they do all day, every day, is they put these buttons on. And it made a productivity spike. All right, so productivity increases, and that's what Henry Ford is really credited with. So here's those notes. So Henry Ford is mass producing the car using the assembly line. By 1920, Ford was making one car every minute. Boom, he was selling them for like $500 too, which is expensive, not astronomically expensive. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about how people ended up paying for this stuff, because that's interesting. What happened though is Ford did not really change the car that much. He failed to kind of innovate, and then competition came in, stuff like Dodge and Chrysler and GMC, which is a little bit later, General Motors, Chevrolet. But the assembly line made productivity go way up, and productivity is officially defined as output per unit of input. So that's what we know about some of the good things. So this good thing, Henry Ford, his assembly line, completely changes industry. I mean, it changes industry. So there's lots and lots of goods that are being produced very quickly, very productive. So companies need to keep their workers happy, because you got to remember, I mean, sometimes it's like you may want to blow your brains out, but instead of forming these unions and getting all this, because that's really hasn't been working a lot, what they're doing is they've got welfare capitalism. This is ways to keep their employees happy. Like, you have some benefits, you have some leave, some vacation time, you know, you get bonuses, stuff like that. Welfare capitalism. Cars did a lot more than just expand industry, so it helped expand the country. Cars changed the shape of this country forever. It's a huge thing. So cars use rubber, metal, gas. They need to be repaired, right? They need dealerships. They need people who can design the cars, people who can sell the cars and market the cars, and all of these become jobs that people have. This all kind of takes place in Detroit, which is in Michigan. It's called Detroit. The Detroit Pistons. You know, it's Motor City. The Detroit Pistons are named after the car engine. Car engines have pistons. So Detroit, in just 3 years, triples in size. Midwest cities in Ohio and the Midwest are big into rubber production. They have rubber factories, and now all of a sudden rubber is this big deal because you got to put them on tires, right? So rubber starts going up, and these cities start popping up everywhere. And you know, if I were to show you a picture of LeBron James' jersey from when he was in Cleveland, you would see right here a little Goodyear logo, because the Goodyear tire factory is in Cleveland, Ohio. So all these things make jobs, and that's huge. It helps the country expand. And cars also help the country expand because, well, cars get you from point A to point B much faster. So cars take people further. So people can so people can commute between the cities and the suburbs. Now, if you live in the cities, you're in these cramped, small, little areas. You don't have a lot of room. But if you have a car, you can just take that car from your house out in the suburbs outside of the city, drive 10, 15 minutes into the city, and you can work and go home. You can have space. You can have your own home, your own piece of land. If you have kids, they can grow up and run around, and they would have schools out in the suburbs. So we see a boom in that, and also tourism. You know, that's big now, people going on vacation, but that really wasn't a thing. Now it's much bigger, and we see a big boom in tourism because of Henry Ford and his assembly line and all these changes in industry. There are also new products everywhere, like stuff's coming out. We've got refrigerators, vacuums, radios, airplanes. And here's the thing about the radio. You got to remember that before all this streaming stuff, people would actually gather around the television to watch TV at a certain time. Like if you wanted to watch American Idol, which I guess they still kind of do, you know, the family would gather around. Or when my mom was growing up, when you wanted to watch the news, it only came on one time. If you wanted to know what was happening that day, you had to sit down at a certain time. It came on twice a day. You had to watch the news. And that's kind of how radios operated. People would, you know, families would gather around and like listen to the radio, which is lame, but that's just what they did. And also you have airplanes, you have commercial flights. You can take a flight from somewhere, so you can pay money. A little bit different. You have like a helmet and goggles on. They didn't go super far, but we kind of see a birth into that. And by the 60s, we're flying places, people. We got airports, we're moving, we're grooving, okay? So we've got new products coming out everywhere. And how are we going to sell these things? So here are our products, and you got two kind of big questions. How are we going to sell those things? And how are people going to pay for them, right? And I can invent something. I can invent this pen all day, but if you don't want to buy it, and if you don't have money to buy it, then what's the point, right? So how are we going to sell these things? We're going to sell them by advertising. In this day and age, everything is just constantly being advertised to us. We've got advertisements everywhere, but this is kind of your first push into advertising and into marketing products to certain people. So you know, if you wanted to sell a vacuum, you would kind of you'd put a housewife up on the picture, and you'd say, "Oh, cleaning up has never been easier. Now I have more time, you know, to cook for my husband because that's all I can do, you know, because you're a housewife and that's how it was." You know, or to have a radio, sit down, hear the news with your kids, right? So you have advertisements and marketing jobs for those, and now that is a billion-dollar industry, is advertising and marketing, and this is getting a big push. And also, how are we going to pay for these things? All right, so I mean, we want them. How am I going to buy them? How am I going to buy my new refrigerator, you know? Well, if I don't have the money to pay for it, we're going to kind of start the system of credit. Kind of like, hey, I don't have $500 to buy a car, but I do have $100 every month that I can pay you for 5 months. And you see banks and credit companies that start, and they just have a bunch of money, and you say, hey, I'm going to buy this this car for $500. And the bank says, okay, they give you $500, you pay for the car, it's yours, and you pay the bank $600. So the bank's made $100 in this process, and that system is called a system of credit. You're credible if you can pay that back, like if you have street cred. I don't know if people say that, but... So that system of credit is kind of paying for something without really paying for something, crediting or financing something. And I'm bringing that up because it's going to get us into a lot of trouble here in the 1930s part of this. So you need to know about credit. You need to know about all this stuff coming out and people needing and wanting to buy it. And they're buying it on credit. So they're buying it on money that they may not necessarily have. And if enough people do that, and then enough people don't pay it back, then that money's going to be gone. So think about that with credit. How are people paying with this? Well, they're paying with credit. So during this time, and this is just, I'm getting through it, we had two presidents. Okay, the first one's Warren G. Harding, and Warren G. Harding is a Republican, and now he wanted a big business. He wanted business to be big. He wanted government to be small. So would he lean left or right? Warren G. Harding dies kind of randomly. Which I put down here at the bottom. But he was popular at the time that he died. But he's kind of looked back at now is not the greatest president ever. He would appoint his friends to federal government positions, similar to how Andrew Jackson did with the spoils system, kind of. But he appointed his friends. He was from Ohio, and his friends were called the Ohio Gang. Okay, and one of the members of the Ohio Gang was a guy named Albert Fall. And Albert Fall took a bribe from an oil company, and he let this oil company drill on protected federal land. And this was a big scandal. You're not allowed to do that. It's called the Teapot Dome Scandal. So when you're thinking of Warren G. Harding, think he wants big business, but yeah, he's got the Ohio Gang, he's got the Teapot Dome Scandal. Him and Albert Fall really get themselves into a bad spot. Again, he dies kind of randomly, and he is succeeded by the Vice President, Calvin Coolidge, who I have just so little to say about. I mean, Calvin Coolidge is fine. He likes big business. Not a lot to say. But in the post-World War I, kind of before the Great Depression, which is coming up here soon, you've got these two presidents. So what I need from you kind of your main takeaways are that post-World War I, things are good and things are bad. You've got labor strikes, you've got farmers not doing as good as they need to, but you've also got this boom and change in industry. And it's a lot of stuff that kind of takes us into what we now see as a modern era. People making products and then us being sold those products and buying them. The assembly line, working off of credit. Those are your real big takeaways from this lecture. And you also need to remember Warren G. Harding and his Teapot Dome scandal, because big business is happening all around on this country, and he's promoting big business, but at the same time, he's kind of being corrupted. And so, we may see a shift in those things. But that is what you need to know. There's not going to be another assignment today. I'm going to make this your performance and your assessment. I'm going to add a couple questions here at the end of this lecture. So you will have work again tomorrow, but this one's just going to be quick and easy. I appreciate you guys, and I hope everyone's staying safe. Remember, just as an announcement, please do not message me on Remind or email me. I need it all at one spot, because I've got to report and I've got to make sure I'm logging all my interactions with you. And if I can keep that in one spot, it makes my life 1,000 times easier than getting a remind and then getting an email and then looking at Google Hangouts and getting a message some other way, and it's a lot. So if you can keep it in Google Hangouts, that would be great. I've got it. It notifies me on my phone when I get a message. I can respond like that. And also, thanks for being patient. There are kinks to be worked out. It's okay. Everyone's going to be fine. We're working through it. I'm learning. You're learning. We're all learning at the same time. But I appreciate it, and I will virtually see you tomorrow. I miss each and every one of you. My favorite part of this job was definitely not this. So hopefully we're back soon. Stay safe. Bye-bye.